Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing After All by After All.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
I don't know guys, it feels like I've been straining my voice for some time because it doesn't sound that good right now. I'm not doing anything, this is my natural voice. It just kind of sounds very rough and scratchy and I don't know what about it. But I'll try my best in doing this review, and anyway, here's some of my favorite bits from this album. So After All are very unique anomaly in the world of prog, or more specifically in the world of proto-prog. I don't wish to spoil the review, but I will say this: their organ-based type of music reminds me a lot of Cressida, and they have a lot of British influences in their blood running through them and through the music, and that's all good and all, except for the fact that these guys are from America. You see, After All, which I don't really have a lot of information about them, seeing as they're not even mentioned on the Prog archives, are just a small band from Tallahassee, Florida, which is surely the prog capital of the USA. But the thing is, even calling After All a band would be sort of an overstatement, seeing as they are more equivalent to the musical equivalent of a one-night stand. So some backstory. After All were a quartet which were formed by Mark Ellerby. He was a professor at the Florida State School of Music, and together with a former student of his and two acquaintances, he formed this band. Now unfortunately, as I said, there isn't that much information about them, and when it comes to the times, I really can't tell when anything happened, but I will make the educated assessment that this happened around about 1968 and 1969. And together this band would write music which would honestly be quite groundbreaking for the time, combining jazz, blues, rock and psychedelic music all together in one place, which would be the groundworks upon which prog would be substantiated. But it seems like these guys really weren't trying to reinvent the wheel or something, they just wanted to create whatever they wanted to make and to let off some musical steam, so per se, so they did so and wrote this music and made it. And then in 1969, the band basically received sort of a freebie from a friend of a producer in a studio around Tallahassee, which let them a couple of days to actually create this album and record in the studio, so they made this album in only a few days time. And after the production of this album was complete, the band did the only next logical move and abruptly they disbanded. They didn't try and tour this album, they didn't try and market it, they didn't try and write a second album, they didn't even have any feuds between them. They just decided that this was over and each and every one went his own musical way. And the resulting of this timely disbanding was what basically made this album a very obscure release. Nobody really knew about this, and most of it just gathered dust and wasn't really heard by anyone besides a handful of people. But rest assured, as this is no ordinary album, and many people would call this one maybe the best representation of what's known as a hidden gem in rock and prog music. You see, to today, as of 2022, a decent vinyl copy of the original pressing of this album goes for around about $200 to $250, and I've even seen all the way up to like $500, which is just mind-boggling. So if you're one of those lucky people who actually has a copy of this one and you never really listened to it and you didn't know of its true value up until now, well, you might want to think about selling this one and going off into a very nice vacation. Now, this album, it is genuinely very good. It is fronted by a lot of organs, with of course the front one being the Hammond organ. LRB's lead vocals on here are really good, and they remind me a lot of Jim Morrison from The Doors, and I love that so much. And honestly, all of the members in this band shine quite equally, even the bass. Yes, it is a well-known thing that a lot of albums recorded by, let's say, amateurs back in the 60s and 70s had one consistent flaw in them, and that was the bass, which was subdued as fuck to the point where you couldn't even hear it in the final mix. Yet this album, for some unknown reason, despite being recorded in such a short time and probably not having the best production in the world, has a very smooth, very loud, very clear, and very well written bass line, which is just following this album into greatness. And speaking of 60s music, there's something deeply 60s and deeply old about this album, and this is like this general point which I've come to think about when I listen to this music. You know, whenever I listen to prog, like prog from the 70s, like Close to the Edge or stuff like that, I never really think to myself, you know what, this sounds like old music. You know, when I listen to swing and when I listen to even some sorts of jazz and stuff like that, I think, oh, this is what old music sounds like. But when I listen to usual prog, I never think to myself, this is old, like this is 50 years old, because it doesn't sound like that. But this album had the distinct old sense to it, which I really love. And despite not being alive back at the time when this one was created, I still feel this sort of nostalgia with the music to be found on here. So with all of the magic that is to be found in this album by After All, what does it actually sound like? And well, the short answer would be, it just sounds very great. It is consistently good. Each and every track is good as the last and the next one. They're all great, and I wouldn't really say there are any absolute bangers on here, no 10s out of 10s or stuff like that. But honestly, when an album is consistently good, it's much better than an album which has only a few bangers and everything else is just kinda not there. The first 3 tracks on the album are the longer ones, and they're definitely more explorative in the realm of prog, and I specifically really like that. And the exploring of prog and progressive music is kinda lost on the second side, except for the first track on the B-side, which is called And I Will Follow. This song just has it all, and especially when it comes down to the keys. The keyboards on here are played so masterfully, they're so well composed, it just blew my brain off. And the vocals by, I just wanted to say Jim Morrison, but no, by Mark Ellerby are also great, and of course the rest of the band are just doing their thing, and it sounds amazing. And as I said, the rest of this album is equally good, maybe not as explorative, but honestly still very well made. And yeah, that's about it. If you're an enjoyer of old proto-prog, like, I don't know, Colosseum and of course Cressida, and you don't know this one quite yet, I highly urge you to go out and check this one, because it is so well reminiscent of those two, to the point where it's really just a hidden gem with really no expiration date on it. I have no idea what led to the creation of this cover. I really have no information about it, but look at it. It just looks so authentic to the music that it's representing. You just kind of have to, plop a Vertigo label on there, and it looks so natural. I just love the absurd and surreal nature of this one. It's just so odd, it's so absurd, it aged like milk basically, and it looks exactly what you'd expect a hidden gem album cover to look like. And you must remember that this album also came out 1 year before the debut of Cressida and 2 years before their sophomore album of Asylum. Now, I'm not gonna point fingers here, but I see a lot of similarities between the cover of Asylum and the cover of this album, and maybe that's just me, but it feels like that very much, so we must think of that as if Cressida took at least some inspiration from this very obscure band from Tallahassee. So all in all, this one gets a very solid proto-progish rating of 8 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Sheshet by Sheshet. I of course want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Wanham, Ristif Kings, and Lindsay Haycox. You are all just so good. And yeah, if you want to be a supporter of this channel, you can check the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.